Hi, this should be working. Just getting this set up, copying the link, and pull out the chat. Back in Hamburg. All right. We are live right now, live from Hamburg. Live from Hamburg. All right, so this is my German setup. So let me know if this is working, if it's not working. And yeah, hi everyone. Let me get the chat out. All right, video is lagging. Yeah, the German internet. We had this problem before in Germany. So, if it's, let me know how the connection is. For everyone who's just joining us, welcome. I hope this is working. I'm in Germany, just arrived. Hey Fabrice, hey Tomas, Dom Dom. Yeah, so I'm in Germany. I just got back. I just got out of quarantine today with a negative corona test. I don't think I'm going to be able to sail, though, anytime in the next few weeks, as we're expecting our second baby in April, and so that makes it difficult to go away for a windsurfing trip, despite all the corona restrictions. Anyway, I hope you guys have been getting on the water. If you have, let us know how it's been in the chat. If you haven't, well, hopefully there's wind coming wherever you are. And if you've been sailing, I want to know what you've been working on, what the conditions were like. As always, if you get photos, videos, you can post them in the group, and I can coach them. All right, the video is lagging. Yeah, we've got this problem with the German internet again. I'm not sure the best way to deal with this. We seem to have a setup last time that was kind of working. I can't remember exactly what we were doing. The internet's definitely better in Hawaii than in Hamburg here. This is something I'm going to have to figure out. I think you guys suggested getting a SIM card and using a wireless router, like a SIM router, because the data internet is better than the wired internet here in Hamburg. So I'll look into that this week. Now that I'm out of quarantine, I can do that. Yeah, cool. We've got a lot of people coming in. Hey, Ragnar. Good to hear that you were doing some training, if not sailing. Hey, Mert, Mateo, DG, Jorg, Steve, Greg, Carl, Julian. Great to see you guys all here. So we're going to go through our standard coaching today. I'm still kind of getting over my jet lag. I tell you, brains and bodies are not meant to travel all the way around the world in 24 hours. It's like someone took a egg scrambler or a whisk or something inside my brain. And it doesn't get easier. The more you do it, the harder it gets. Hey, Oliver. I've been doing this trip between Europe and Hawaii a few times a year for the last, 15 years or something, a long time. And it just gets harder and harder and harder. But anyway, let's get into it. Good to see all you guys, familiar faces. Yeah, like I said, I'm in Germany, back in Hamburg, out of quarantine today. Just did my negative test this morning, which allows me to get out of the house. I've been in the apartment for the last 5 days. Hey, Leon. Yeah, it's always good to get a session. Small waves are better than nothing. Agree 100%. Hey, Caro. Surfing on the Baltic today and St. Peter. Ooh, I would have liked that. Yeah, maybe if there's sailing, I could do sailing that's around Hamburg. If it's like within an hour or two within Hamburg, I could make that work. So if there are conditions, let me know. Uh, Carl, good to hear you're getting some hand recovery. For anyone who's tuning in for the first time, this is the Sunday live coaching. We do this, hey Mark, we do this every Sunday around this time, 8 p.m. And it's just windsurfing coaching, and it's guided by you guys. So you post questions, comments, videos, photos, and I offer my coaching on them. Today, we've got a bunch of different topics that were posted in the Facebook group, and the Facebook group is where we have our weekly discussion. It's a private group on Facebook, Graham Ezzy's Windsurf Coaching Community, or you can find it facebook.com/group/edgycoaching. Today, we're going to talk about backside airs, back loops, foot straps, stalled forward loops, and normal forward loops. And those were all topics that were posted in the group. And as always, if you have a specific question or topic, just ask it in the chat and we'll talk about it. The beauty of doing this live is that we have this one-to-one connection, and so I get to really hear what you guys want to talk about, and then I talk about that because it's fun to make these YouTube videos where I'm just talking about a specific topic, but it's more fun to be interacting directly with you guys because then I know that what I'm saying actually has an audience and that it's what people want or are interested in. Hey Julian and Dom Dom, yeah, I think we're coming up to the 1-year anniversary. Maybe we've already passed it. I'm not sure. I've got to look back and see what the first coaching was. But you're right, it was in March last year. It was around the time that the quarantine started, the Corona quarantine started, which is what inspired me to start doing the coaching. I wasn't even sure it was going to be an ongoing thing. It was just something I wanted to do once or twice, and well, we've been doing it for a year straight, which is pretty cool. And Dom Dom and some of your other guys have been there since the beginning. We have a lot of new faces, and that's pretty great to see. Hey Brian, 5-0 session. I like 5-0 sessions. I love that feeling where you've got enough wind, but it's still kind of light. You can really feel the waves. They're great sessions for practicing wave awareness and working on the fundamentals because the wind's not getting in the way too much. Mateo, the goiter is difficult. It's difficult. It's if you have a certain level, a certain advanced level, it's not that difficult to rotate off the back of the wave. It's still an advanced move, but it's not that difficult if you have a certain level. But to land it back in front of the wave is very difficult, especially consistently. And that's even something that not all the pros can do. I think Levi was one of the first people to really start working on getting the goiters consistent, and then Cowley as well. And then you had guys like me, Brauzinho, and Bujma, who are all a kind of a similar generation, and we were, I think, the first, along with then Levi and Cowley, who were kind of pioneering those moves, the first to really get them consistent, so we're landing them 100% in the waves. And yeah, a lot of the pro guys can't land them 100%. I mean, there are definitely a lot of them that can as well now. But anyway, the point is that it's a very difficult move to land back into the wave. So when you're working on the goiter, be happy to be landing them off the back, and then recognize that the process to taking it from landing off the back to landing in front of the wave is a very difficult journey. But one that's worth taking, especially if you are young and dedicated to the sport, as I think you are, Mateo. Hey, Tomas. Yep, it's cold here. I've got a sweater on. Ciao, Pier Francesco. Yeah, Dom Dom brings up Paul. So Paul's been absent from our live streams for a while, but we're actually planning to do a live stream together next weekend. Hopefully that works. We'll see. Who knows with all the quarantine restrictions going on. but that will be kind of a nice 1-year live stream. So when I started, I was doing it with a buddy of mine, Paul, who was the one that kind of pushed me into doing these. And so, yeah, I'm pretty happy to do an anniversary session with him next weekend if that works. Cool. And as always, the coaching is sort of funded by the donations, like the little things like I've got a light and the camera and the mic and all that stuff that kind of helps keep the equipment side of this going. Thanks everyone here who's donated. You guys are great, and you're all great, but thanks to these guys. If you want to donate, there's a link to it. I think it's in the announcements section in the Facebook group, and there's just a PayPal link. Yeah, it's right there. And there's a dollars link and a euro link because PayPal is weird with different currency conversions. All right, let's get back to the home page and get into the coaching. Unless you guys have any other requests. Ciao Italia. I'd love to come to Italy for windsurfing. Sardinia's on my list. There are other places on my list. I keep seeing these amazing posts on Instagram from the sailing in Italy, I guess recently, I guess from now. And it looks really fun. So it's somewhere that I really want to go. I've only been to Italy, I think once or twice. And I had great times all the times that I've been there, so it's somewhere I want to go. Alex, oh, sorry to hear about that. I hope that the milk is not in anywhere that can't be cleaned. Tristan tried his first goiter yesterday. Congrats, trying's the first step. You didn't jump at all, but it's that first step that paves the way to landing the move. And a lot of times, just trying it the first time, even if, like you said, you don't jump at all, it's making all these connections in the brain where you're like, oh, that's what it feels like to try to throw myself in that way, because you can have an idea of what it all feels like that's completely disconnected from the reality. So that first attempt is the most important. That's what starts your journey for a move, for any move. And a move like the goiter, which is very difficult and very, I think, kind of special in how its dynamic works with what the wind is doing. That first step is really important because it's showing your brain the difference between your feeling and the reality. And then as those are getting closer and closer together, that's when you start to land them, right? It's when you connect what your brain thinks the feeling is and the action is to the reality. And when those are the same, then you're landing them. But when you start, your brain has an idea, but it's not right. But it's only through that process of trial and error that your brain starts readjusting and re-examining what it thinks is the right way to do the move, how it works, right? Mateo says he's scared to fall on the sail. So with the goiter, and I just want to talk about the goiters quickly before we get into the other topics that we have posted in the group. With the goiter, there's not much risk of falling into the sail with your face. Often you'll land in the beginning just on the boom, and you're holding it on the boom. And because you're not going very high, it's not a very hard impact. I think you have to have a certain base level for trying the goiters. It's not something I would recommend to someone who's just gotten into wave riding. But if you have that level, I think they're a pretty safe move to try. And you want to aim to go off the back of the wave. You want to try it in side shore to side offshore conditions. It's a much more difficult move to learn when the wind is onshore. And people do. I know a lot of people who have learned the goiter in onshore conditions, the Pozo Locos, for example. But it's a lot easier to learn in side shore conditions where you have a lot of speed through the bottom turn. You can throw the sail. But, if you have a bottom turn that has a lot of speed, even in onshore conditions, and then in that case you want to have the sail really powered up, you can also learn them then. It's also not that hard. But then your fundamental level needs to be a little bit higher because you've got to be able to get to the top of the wave with a lot of speed in those onshore conditions, which is difficult in itself. All right, so I'm gonna go through the group and let's just get right into the coaching. So we've got a question from Alex about a broken board. I'm not a specialist for repairing boards. I've done my own repairs for surface dings and little issues like hitting rocks and stuff. This is more of a this kind of crack that's from jumping and from a hard landing has more to do with the integrity of the board, and so that's not something where I'm an expert. And so I recommend seeing a shaper or a professional board repairer. Carl recommends talking to John at Moo, so I recommend following up with Carl's recommendation there. All right, moving on. All right, so we've got this. All right, so we're trying to put time codes on some of the YouTube videos, and we've got some great volunteer work going on from Dom, Mark, and Fabrice, so that you guys have an easier time finding the topics on the past live streams, which are mostly posted to YouTube. So going forward, all the live streams will be posted to YouTube. Some of the past ones were, some of the past ones weren't, and we're putting together time codes and references so you can find topics in the past live stream. All right, hey Mark. All right, now getting into the topic from Greg. So Greg had a question about backside airs. I was listening to live coaching on Sunday but couldn't comment as I was driving back from a cold, wet, and gray but very enjoyable windsurfing session on a deserted beach in onshore conditions. So the actual topics felt very relevant. It was bolt onshore, and I attempted my first backside aerial rather than a jump. I was really pleased by getting the high five that sent me forward, landing on the face of the wave ultimately. My rig handling felt lame though. I didn't really know what to do with the rig in the air, as it was not a jump in its classical meaning. For hitting the lip and for launching, the rig is tilted downward and backward, mast towards the beach, close to horizontal. Although I bet mine was not quite like that. But then, how do you transition the rig from hitting the lip position into a good in-air position and then into the landing position to be able to sail elegantly away? This is a great question, Greg, and I love to hear that you were going for the backside aerials. As I've said before, backside aerials, especially in onshore conditions, are a great maneuver. It looks good, feels good, and most importantly, it teaches you a lot about wave riding fundamentals and timing. In order to do a proper backside aerial, you've got to get that bottom of the board to get that high five connection with the throwing lip. And so when I talk about the high five, this is one of our recurring themes. It's that moment that the lip is throwing, getting that to connect with the flat bottom of the board. And that's what transfers this energy that's in the wave into board speed, which if you're doing a backside air, it's throwing that board into the air. Right? That's the high five. So great job, Greg, for discovering that. So your question is about what you do with the rig in the backside air. You felt like it was a little bit awkward. And that's fine. It's fine actually to be a bit awkward. And the most important part is the initiation and getting those high five moments, and then your body will figure out the landing. But if you want to get a more and more radical backside, where you're laying the sail down and hitting it with your body more horizontal and getting in the air kind of like a shove it and then coming upright again, there is some specific technique for that, and they feel great. So what you want to really think about is as you're initiating the turn into the lip, you're bringing the sail back towards the tail of the board. And I really think about jamming my foot of the sail into my shins. So I'm like jamming, it's touching my shins, pressing into my shins, and I'm leaning with my body. So if the wave is this, so you're looking directly perpendicular at the wave. So this is the wave, and I'm riding the wave. I'm throwing I'm going backside this direction. I'm throwing my body there. So you throw your body the opposite direction of where you're headed and down into the bottom of the wave as you're driving the sail into your shins. And that combination of motions, it's this kind of magic. And I like to say magic because there's a few of these things you can do in windsurfing, like moving the head in the forward loop, where it's just this one really simple motion, and it makes a huge difference to the rotation and the dynamics of the rig. And this is the case with the backside. If you do this where you're jamming the foot of the sail into your shins, and you're leaning into that corner, so you're leaning down into the bottom of the wave and away from the direction that you're turning. So again, you're going this way. Then it's putting your weight onto the sail, and so then when you make that connection with the lip and you sheet out the sail and you try to bring it in front of you. So it's not just about sheeting out the sail, but about sheeting out the sail and bringing it in front of you. And so that means you're pulling up with your front hand and you're pushing out with your back hand. And that gets the back wind that lifts you up again and elevates you. You get this flotation feeling, and it feels really magical. So that's something to work up to. And you can do it gradually. You know, the nice thing about the backside air is that you can start doing them upright, and you can come over more and more and more and more and more to horizontal. It's not just either or. So DG asks, do you need a lot of board speed for the backside air? You don't, but like most things in windsurfing, the more board speed you have, the easier it is, the more dynamic it is, and the higher you'll go. But you don't need a ton of board speed, especially if you're not trying to do a huge backside aerial. Let me see. So I've got a bunch of videos queued up for our other maneuvers, but let me try and find, so the backside ones. I was going to pull from here. So here are some from Ginshu, and I'll show you. So Greg, this is something to work up to. Again, it's kind of a gradual thing. Like, it's great that you're getting this high five and you're going for the backside airs, and it's okay to have a bit of an awkward feeling in the air, and just embrace that, because what's important is figuring out the timing, figuring out that initiation to get that high five, because that opens up so much more in your wave riding, not just for the backside airs, but for frontside airs, frontside turns. It's opening so much. It's teaching you so much about how to get that connection with the wave, so the wave connecting with the board. So just focusing on that connection is all you need to do, in a way. If you're doing that, it's great, it's enough. But if you want to keep working on your backside airs and getting them to be more radical, then this is kind of what I'm talking about. We want to work up to. So you can see here, I'm jamming the sail into my shins, and so here, as I'm coming to the impact, the sail is really hitting my shins, and then I'm leaning. So I'm still looking where I'm going, but I'm leaning with my body down here. So it feels way more radical than it looks. So like in this example where I'm pretty much horizontal, it feels like my head is gonna touch the bottom of the wave. So I'm really like leaning way back here, if you can see where my mouse is. And that's how you get these really kind of laid out backsides. And then you can see that I'm not just pushing against the sail, I'm driving it in front of me. So bringing the front hand up again and pushing out with the backhand, and then the sail gets backwinded and it lifts up and lifts you up with it. Thomas, roger that. So we'll talk about the stalled floors next time at a time when Marine is here. Dan, that's great to hear about the back loops. I'm so stoked. The head is key to the back loop. Let us know if you got some video. I'd love to see the video and to celebrate it in the group. Maybe the Tenerife cam captured it. I'm not sure where you were sailing. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit more on these backsides. So again, so you're just really leaning into this area. So it's in front of the wave and away from where you're headed. And then it feels crazy. It feels like you're really leaning into the abyss, which is a really fun feeling because then you magically get lifted up again. And that process of getting lifted up again is not just about shooting out on the sail, pushing out on the sail. It's trying to bring the sail in front of you. And so when you're doing that, you're bringing your front arm up and you're pushing out with your backhand in that kind of aggressive shooting out process. And then once you're upright again, the sail starts to fill with wind and you can land and keep going. I think I've got another one in this video. I think this is that's not really much of an aerial. That actually might be it for backside airs. But you can see the dynamic just for normal backside where I'm really jamming that sail into my shins and leaning over here, really leaning over here. And then bringing the sail up in front of me, which then pushes me upright again. And trying to get that connection with the lip, trying to get that timing. That might be it though. All right, so we're gonna put this one away and move on to the next topic. Greg, I think you've got some things to work on. Like I said at the start, if you're just working on the high fives, that's also enough. If you want to work on getting your backside airs more and more polished, more and more dynamic, that's great. And I've given you the steps to do that, which is pulling the sail into the shins, leaning forward and away from where you're going, and then bringing the sail up in front of you by pulling up with the front arm and shooting out with the backhand. But if you're just working on the high fives, that's enough. That's great. You'll be improving your wave sailing dramatically. All right, next up. We've got these back loops from Dom Dom. So Dom Dom's a great sailor. We've seen a lot of his footage in the group over the last year. And so he lands about 3 out of 10 back loops. Is that right, Dom Dom? And here's a collection of back loops for our coaching. Some landed, some not. And so Dom Dom had a specific question when he posted this, saying that he feels like in these really windy conditions, he wants to go up, do almost the entire rotation at the top, stop rotating and then fall down, but worries that maybe that has too much whip. And my answer is yes and no, that you can do versions of that or not. I've got some of my own footage that we can go through and talk about different strategies for doing back loops, especially back loops when it's really windy. One of the things I want to point out, Dum Dum, is that in most of these where you fall, you can see that there's a difference. So in this one, you're bailing. It actually looks like a pretty good initiation. So I wonder why you bailed. But if you don't feel comfortable, let go, of course, in this maneuver. But like that's a pretty solid one. You can see so I would like to know why you're letting go. in those, because that initiation does look good, looks solid. So with these, so like you've landed this, and that's great, and we celebrate that. But I want to point out that you're landing pretty flat. So rather than really landing on the nose, you're coming down almost flat with the board, right? Here, attempt number 5, I think there's a lot that's done correct, but you can see that your head, it's hard to see with this angle, but your head is not spotting the landing. Again, the head is so important with the back flip. It's so important to guide the rotation with the head rather than with the body. It's so easy to guide the rotation with the hips and with the body and really throw it around, but that's not a fine-tuned enough way to rotate, and so you'll end up either over-rotating or under-rotating the majority of the time and not land them consistently. Whereas if you're rotating with your head, you can really control and calibrate the rotation. And so you can see, like with this one where you under-rotate, like here your head is looking not where you're going to land, it's looking at the beach. And you just under-rotate just a tiny bit, and you're not throwing it with your body. I think you have a good rotation, Dom. But I'm just pointing out that I think the only issue with this one is the head not spotting the landing. And if your head was looking just a little bit more, you would have rotated the extra few degrees to land this one. It's so important to spot the landing with the head. This you don't take off enough into the wind, and you realize that, and you don't go for the rotation. And there you can see that you're looking a lot more with your head. Like there's a moment here where I can tell that your head is really looking around. It's hard to see with this angle, but I can tell. I can see the I don't know if you guys can see it. I don't know if you have the same resolution I have, but I can see that you're using your head more aggressively in that one, which helps to land it. So there's a few things I want to touch on. One is landing on the nose. So this is a back loop landing for me, and what I want you to look at is just how much on the nose I'm landing. So if this is the board and this is the water, I'm really not landing flat or even a little on the nose and on the tail. I'm really coming down on the nose, and that's what allows for that really soft, easy landing with the back loop. So you can do back loops really, really high, and you land on the nose and you kind of sink down into the water and it absorbs the force, and it's a wonderful, soft, easy landing. So you really can land on the nose and steer down to land on the nose. And so I really like this photo because I think it captures that aspect of the move, which for landing them consistently is really important, because it also gives you a bit more wiggle room. Okay, so Don you're saying always feel on the edge on the way down with bad control. So one of the ways to really help with the control is really sheeting in, and then also, so like one way to think about it is as you're coming down with the back loop, if you're sheeting out, it's pushing you more into the rotation, and if you're sheeting in, it's stopping the rotation, kind of like going into a forward again, right? That's then pulling you downwind. And so I kind of think about it as coming around from the apex, and then once I've come down through the eye of the wind, then I'm really sheeting in, and I'm really trying to use the wind to steer my gear. And it's the feeling in my head, which really helps connect it for me, is the feeling of sailing downwind. So like kind of on a broad reach, or even a little bit more downwind than a broad reach. And it's that similar kind of sailing, a similar angle to the wind. And so then I'm kind of pushing forward my front arm and sheeting in with my backhand and pushing the gear in front of me. So the sail's in front of me, it's not with me. It's in front of me, which is the same angle you have if you're really trying to bear off the wind sailing just normally on the water. And keep your back leg tucked up, and then just aim. You're looking with your head where you're going to land, and you're just aiming to come down with your nose there and really downwind. So I think that I'm going to go through some of my loops, which I think will offer some bits of tips, but sort of the three big takeaways, Dom. One is to land more on the nose. Two is you don't need to rotate as much. I get the feeling from watching the video that you think you need to rotate more than you do. So you can rotate less and still land fine. And the more you land on on the nose, the less you can rotate, I think. This is not a theme that I've thought of before, but this just kind of came into my head, and I think it's correct. The more on the nose you land, the less you can rotate. Because then when you come down into the water and you're on the nose, the rig automatically positions itself, and it turns that last bit of the rotation for you. Whereas if you're on your tail and you're under rotated, you just get backwinded and fall over. Whereas like with your if you're coming in down on the nose, there's this like pivot that happens where you are getting backwinded, but it's turning you in the water to complete the last bit of the turn of the loop. So landing on the nose is really important. It helps the rotation. It's soft. Helps give you a bit of control. Two is rotating less, like we just said, and then three is really feeling that that sort of downwind sailing control on the way down. So what I think would be useful to think about, Dom, is think about pushing the sail more in front of you. So what I notice is that you're keeping the sail quite with you, especially these ones where you feel like you're over-rotating. And so if at this point, like right as you're coming through the wind, you bring the sail, rather than keeping it with you, you're pushing it forward, sort of in that same position as you would be in when you're sailing on that really downwind reach. It will give you more control in the rotation. It will slow down the rotation, and it will allow you to steer more in the air, which is the ultimate goal, right? That's, I guess, what control means. So I think that will be really helpful for you. And then I'm going to go through some of my videos too to try and answer some of the questions you had. But so those three takeaways. So one is really trying to land on the nose. Two is realizing that you don't need to rotate so much. And three is pushing the gear in front of you as you're coming around the eye of the wind, as you're coming around the apex of the jump. Pushing the gear in front of you and getting in that position that you would be in if you were sailing really, really downwind, like almost more downwind than a broad reach, right? Which is kind of this rotation, or this position where your front arm is extended, your back arm is sheeting in, you're really kind of pushing the sail forwards and downwind, and you're driving with your front leg straight. Does that make sense? You know the position I'm talking about, where you're just really going downwind, like if you're just trying to go downwind as fast as possible. So not just straight on the wind, but really, really downwind. All right, Dom, you're saying, I think I rotate too much because I most of the time land on the side instead of above the board. If you land on the side, you need to rotate more to get more help from the sail to lift you up. Okay, interesting. So if you really work on landing on the nose, then that becomes less of an issue. I think that this is all going to come together at one time. If you start thinking of that sailing downwind position as you're coming down from the top of the jump, and you're moving the sail forward, that also makes it easier to steer the sail and makes it easier to keep the nose down and to get that landing on the nose. So I think all three of these tips are connected, and once you kind of figure out one of them, you'll start to figure out all of them. And I guess what I would focus on first is, I think it's important to focus them all together. One is to realize that you don't need to rotate so much. So think about under-rotating a little bit. Two is really coming down on the nose. How do you do that? By getting that sail forward. So I think that's a big thing that you can work on. You've got the head motion. Again, some of these you don't have the head motion, and those you kind of don't rotate enough. But the majority of them you have the right head motion. So let's not worry about that. Think about getting the sail forward, because that is one thing that I can see here that's not really happening that will make a big difference. Now I'm going to go through some of my footage, talk about some aspects in the back loops I'm doing, and also to answer your question about whether you should be rotating constantly from the top down or rotate and then stop and come down. And I've got some examples where I'm doing that and some where I'm not. So I think that's maybe interesting to look at. All right, and Mateo just posted a question in the group, so we can refresh this, check it out, and then I'm going to get into my footage. Dom. So Dom, tell me, does that make sense, what I just said? I know I've spat out a lot of information. Does that make sense? Is that something that you can focus working on? Is that actionable? Cool. Mateo posted his back loop, landed his first back loop. Congrats. We'll get to that after this, Mateo. So Dom, let me know what, if that's actionable, if you can think of, if you can picture doing this, because all the coaching in the world doesn't matter if you can't then start applying it on the water. All right, so here's a video. I've used this before in our coaching because it's a super windy day. I think I'm on a 3-4, super windy day in Gran Canaria, so it's a very windy back loop in windy conditions. And so let's go through this frame by frame. So really sailing straight up, using my head to rotate, not my body. And then you can see that the sail starts to come in front of me. And it's not as dramatic in other videos of the back loop, but you can see that it doesn't stay in the same orientation to my body. You can see it starts coming in front of me. And I do a bit of a slow rotation, so because it's so windy and I really don't want to over rotate, my rotation is very slow. And so I come around very slow from the top of the jump, and I'm not rotating very much. I'm really landing on the nose of the board. So the windier it is, the higher you're going, the more you want to land on the nose of the board. So here you can see, like, this is, I think, the moment that my board starts making contact with the water, and you can see it's pretty close to being vertical. It's not exactly vertical, but I'm really bringing up this leg and really sort of steering with the front leg and steering my front arm, sheeting in the sail to keep the nose board of the board down. And then what happens is, even though I'm steering downwind, when I land, all the forces of everything happening rotate me back around, and you can see that I sink into the water, and that's what's the nice cushion landing in the back loops, and what allows you to go so high in them and still land them. Here's another one. This was not a very windy day. I think it was on a 4-7, powered up on a 4-7, but very different than on a 3-4. And you can see here even more clearly the transition of the gear. So the gear is kind of in line with me, and then here when I spot the landing, and then in this moment I'm moving the gear in front of me. So you can see the transition of the gear from here to here, that the sail is really moving in front of me, and I'm pushing. Yeah, I don't have my front arm totally straight, but you can see that I'm pushing that sail in front of me rather than keeping the same orientation with the sail. And in this one, I'm sort of rotating the whole way down. Again, still landing on the nose. This is a 1 foot one, which I don't know how useful it is to look at, but there are some interesting things in the rotation with respect to your question, Dom Dom. And basically my rotation stops about here. So I go up, I rotate here, and then the rotation stops, and then from this point on, I'm going straight down basically and landing on the nose. And so that's a version of what you were asking about in your initial question. And so I'm not doing a whippy rotation, it's still a bit gradual, but halfway down, and here again you can really see clearly where I'm pushing that sail in front of me. I hope you guys can see that. I can see that happening. And then about halfway down from the rotation, I've stopped rotating. Here, I've stopped rotating and I just sail straight down. We've got one more back loop. So this one, someone said that it's important not to sheet out on the way up. And I found this back loop, which is kind of a weird back loop. It's not very pretty. I don't really like it. But I'm sheeting out quite a bit on the way up. And then I don't know why it's kind of lagging for me. It must be lagging for you if it's lagging for me. Maybe I need to close some of these windows. All right, Dom Dom, you've got a good plan on what to work on. Let me just go through this one a little bit frame by frame. So I'm going up and sheeting out. I've got this really weird position, but then using the head to rotate, head is looking around. And then here you can really also clearly see that I'm bringing that sail like this across my body, right? I hope that's clear from this video, where the sail is kind of like, well, yeah, it's this side, so it's kind of like this, and then I'm bringing it forward across the body there in this moment, spotting the landing, and then just really coming down on the nose. I mean, this is when I'm coming on almost fully vertical on the nose. And you just have that nice like absorption landing. All right, I think that's it for the back loops I wanted to talk about. I hope that that's all clear. All right, let's get into the other topic. Here, Matteo, you've got a back loop crash, but you said you landed your first one thanks to the group. That's great. We celebrate those, so good job, Matteo. Love to see it. You're doing a good job of looking with the head. I can tell that that head is initiating the rotation. You're coming down on the nose, and you landed one. That's great, so keep it up. I want to see video of one that's landed. All right. So moving on, so we talked about backsides, we talked about back loops. We've got a question from Jesse about straps. This is an unfortunate story from Jesse about breaking his foot in the straps, and I'm really sorry to see this, Jesse. That sucks. I hope your recovery is solid and that you get pain-free soon. My main principle with the straps is you want them tight on the sides and loose on the top, so narrow but high. And so you're not riding them like this, you're riding them like this. I wonder if I have straps here I can show you. Anyway, you guys know what I mean. I should have straps somewhere. I'm just going to grab some straps. Wait 1 minute. I'm just gonna grab some straps. Okay, I'm back. Okay, I'm back. All right, Dum Dum, I saw you just posted a question, but then it was erased. Something about landing vertical. Anyway, I'm talking about the straps, but I'd love to see your question, Dum Dum. So these are the straps that I use. These are the Decline Primos, and I know there's a lot of personal preference about straps, and if you've got straps that you like, great. And I love hearing everyone write about what straps that they like, because yeah, again, there's a lot of personal preference, so it's good to hear about the different kinds of straps. These are the straps that I like. These are the Decline Primos, and what I like about them is that they've got this solid webbing on the inside. It's solid plastic, and so they don't stretch. The inside of the strap doesn't stretch. A lot of straps that come with the boards, that come with the production boards, do stretch. And I think you want a stiff strap, or I like a stiff strap like this, because it gives me a solid connection with the board. I can press against the top of the strap, but also it makes it easier to come out of the strap. So what can happen with a stretchy strap is when your foot is in there and you've got the pressure, and it's a lot of pressure, is instead of then the foot being forced out, is that the strap bends. So like this is the outside of the strap is stretchy, so we can show that. So what happens is the strap, let's see if I can show this, is the strap really bends, and then the foot stays stuck in it, because instead of being pushed out, the strap is bending and sort of sticking with the foot. And I know a lot of people who have been injured that way. So that's why I like these stiff Decline Primo straps. It also gives me more control, I feel, where I have that nice control with the board, because I can, as I'm pushing on the top, it's also driving energy into the board. And I mean, this is not a great example, but you can see that as I'm putting pressure on my hand, the hand comes out easily, whereas that's not the case with the stretchier strap. But anyway, so how do you want the straps positioned? So like I said, I like them narrow and tall. So rather than like this, you want them like this. So Sammy says, I had the problem that when I put them high and too narrow, my foot is stuck at 45 degrees. So whenever I fall down in turns, I'm stuck in the water and cannot get out, and it's scary with the waves. Is that a problem of brands? I'm not sure if I understand the question, Sammy, in terms of like, what do you mean by 45 degrees? You mean 45 degrees to the board? Can you clarify exactly what you mean, how this foot is getting stuck? Because I don't want you to get your foot stuck. So let's try and work out a way that that's not the case. Dom, coming back to your question about back loops, landing that vertical on back loops, do you have to send your body back at the impact, not to fall head first? No, you don't have to. Like what happens is, as the board comes into the water, it levels off. That's just naturally what it wants to do, right? Because as you've got the board coming in, you've got all this pressure, like the forces, what's happening with the forces is that they're wanting the board to like right itself again. Does that make sense? So when you're coming down on the back loop, and you've got that angle, just the way that the force works on the water is the board wants to come to this level position. It doesn't want to keep going in on that angle. So it rights itself. So Dom also asked, regarding straps and tuning, how narrow is it so narrow for you that there's no lateral freedom at all on the back strap? Would you consider it too narrow? That sounds too narrow to me. I think you want a little bit of, you want a little bit of play. And again, there's personal preference here. So I'm talking about sort of general heuristics, not hard and fast rules where you want to say like, oh, I want 5 1/4 inches or 5 inches for my straps. And Ragnar, yes, I also set the front straps high. So I'm setting both the front and the rear straps high, which allow me to get my foot all the way in and have a lot of control on the board while feeling like I'm connected with the board, but also able to come out when I want. But Dom, that could be, of course there's a point where it's too narrow, right? It's not like you can just keep going more and more narrow. And it's fine. Like there's a point where it's too narrow, it's pinching your feet, it's hard to get in, it's hard to get out. You want to be able to get your foot in easily and out easily. But my general point is that, I see a lot of straps on boards that look like this, and you want them to look like this. And, the fine-tune elements of whether it's here or here, that's something for you to figure out. You've got to make sure that you can get your foot in easily and out easily. But what you don't want is to have it where it's really wide and the pressure is coming down from the top. So like when my foot is in the strap, I feel pressure on the sides and I've got my foot pretty jammed in there, but I can still wiggle my foot around. I have a bit of play. It's not like my foot is stuck really rigid in one position. Now, Sammy, I still don't really understand what exactly you mean with the 45 degrees. Yeah, but you don't want your foot to get stuck. So I'm thinking that you want to go a little bit wider on the straps because you want to be able to come out easily as well. You want to have the control, but also able to come out more easily. All right, Maureen posted this video about stalled forwards, but she's not here, so we're going to talk about this next week. And Tomas asked about booms, which you guys gave some discussion. I'm using the Chinook reduced diameter booms, and I'm super happy with them. Sammy says feet in normal stance, but when you turn your feet inside the strap, like in a jibe, or turn and fall, the edge of the strap holds the feet. Yeah, if you have that pressure, it can definitely hold the feet in the straps, and it definitely is possible to get the feet stuck in the straps. But I might say, like, just judging from what you just said, Sammy, I might recommend going not necessarily wider, but just a little bit higher, and see how that feels. But you want to be able to come out of them comfortably, and so if that does mean going wider for you, then go wider. Again, what I always say whenever I'm giving advice about fins or straps or anything about the gear is that the most important thing is that you test it, is that you try it. And just that process of testing gear, testing different strap positions, heights, boom heights, whatnot, fins, it'll make you a better sailor. It connects you more to your gear. It helps you to understand what's happening with the gear. Helps you make better decisions when you're setting up your gear. So it makes you a better sailor. That experimentation is so important. Don't fall into a comfort zone just because that's what you've always done. You've got to try new things. You've got to experiment. Keep it fresh. And even if you feel like you've got a setup that you really, really love, yeah, sail on that 90% of the time. But still put time in to trying different things, because you might find something you love even more. And it's so important to do that testing. It's so important. It makes you a better sailor. So find the limits. And Sammy, maybe you're at the point where the straps are too narrow. And then make them wider, and you'll feel safer, and it will work better. Maybe you need to go a little higher. I'm not sure. You've got to do the testing and see how it feels. There was a time when my setup felt great, and I thought, I'm going to make my back strap just a little bit tighter. So I didn't. The width was the same, but I just brought it down a little bit on the top, and I found it really improved my sailing, because my foot wasn't getting as far over on the center line of the board, and so I felt my back foot, and so I felt like I was able to ride the board better with the foot a little bit more on the center line, so I wasn't overpowering the bottom turn rail so much. Ciao, Matteo. Thanks for joining us. Keep posting in the group. I want to see your goiters, your back loops. Keep posting. Ciao, ciao. Anyway, my point with the straps, point with equipment is you want to test. So I've got heuristics that you can use as guidelines. So like, for example, you want the straps narrow but tall, but then you've got to find what the setting is for you, right? Like it's not about going as narrow as possible and as high as possible. That's the general idea of how the straps should look, and then you've got to figure it out for yourself. And that process of testing is so important. It makes you a better sailor. Carl, we've got some nice tacking clips that he posted. Just great tacks, solid tacks. Tacking is a great skill to have in the waves. Helps you to stay upwind. Helps you turn around quickly. If you're serious about wave sailing, it's good to work on your tacks as well. And nice sails, Carl. Looking good. All right, we've got this forward loop from Dan, and then I think that's it. We've got a question from Adrian about GoPros, which I'll touch on. Mark had another question about filming. We've got this video from Jan, who made it into the Windsurfing TV Send It Sunday with his forward loop. So congrats, Jan, great forward loop. And then that's it. We talked about Yelmer's video last week. So let's get into this forward loop, and then we'll talk about the GoPros, and then call it a night. All right, so Dan, he's got this GoPro video posting the forward loop. He's been following the coaching. He's getting around. The hardest part with the forward loop is just getting that initiation, getting the solid rotation going. So great job, Dan. You've already got that figured out. There's just two things I want you to do to make this loop more solid, more controlled, more horizontal, and it will allow you to land on your board and upright. That's getting a wider grip on the boom. So grabbing about here, which I think you've got. You said you put tape on your boom. I think I can see the tape here somewhere. I don't know if it's here or here. If the tape is all the way here next to the clip, that might be too wide, and that's making it difficult to reach so far back. So maybe bring it in sort of somewhere between the clip and your hand. I think somewhere between the clip and where your hand is a good point to put the boom. And then the head. So as I've said, I've got a video on YouTube totally dedicated to this topic. If you haven't watched it, check it out. The point of the video is that the forward loop is not a flip. So one of the things that has come up constantly in the coaching is people say, hey, I'm doing the forward loop. Why should I be looking back? I'm rotating forwards. Why am I looking back? Well, the truth is, with the forward loop, you're not rotating forwards. You're rotating back. You're rotating downwind. The forward loop is a downwind spin. It's a downwind 360. So looking over that downwind shoulder is in the direction that you're going. By looking over that shoulder, it's one of these magic positions where your rotation becomes more controlled, more horizontal, and you get more float, and so you'll land more on your board. You'll complete more of the rotation. So that's really the biggest thing. So you get some of this mast touch here, The more you're looking over your shoulder, the less that happens. So really think about the front loop as that downwind spin, that downwind 360, and you're really looking. It's as if you're on a trampoline and you're doing that spin, right? But you don't even have to be on a trampoline. You can just stand up right now wherever you are and just do that spin, and in the direction that you're used to doing those loops, right? And you see you're turning with your head this way. Like, it's pretty hard to do a spin when you're standing up in the air if your head is looking here or whatever, your head wants to look in the direction that it's going. I would do it right now, but I think I'm going to wake the kids up in the apartment downstairs. But the head turns in the direction you're going, over the shoulder, looking that direction. It will make a huge difference. So the head, and then getting that wider grip, and then you're there. I mean, you've gone through the hardest part with the forwards, so it's just about getting these small elements fine-tuned, and you'll have a big improvement. Cool. Glad to hear. Dad. Yeah, cool. So what I'd want to know is, were you getting the head looking over your shoulder? Could you feel the difference in the rotation? What did you do mentally to go from looking like just kind of like with your body to looking over the shoulder? What was going through your head? What did you do to get that feeling? So I'm curious, Dan, if you can write that in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. Dum Dum says he struggles to reach back too far. You don't have to reach for the clip. Like I said with Dan, if he reaches between the clip and where his hand is, that's fine. That's a good distance. So just a little bit farther from where he is. But you don't have to reach all the way to the clips. I mean, it helps. I mean, if you're reaching all the way to clips, it does allow you to do a more horizontal loop. But you've got good forward loops, Dum Dum. I'm not sure that that's what you need to be worrying about. Reaching so far back. It depends, I think, how long your arms are as well. And if you're reaching too far back, and then it can be awkward, and then you're not getting the right pull on the rotation. Yeah, Sammy's saying about the straps that I prefer higher because I have the control of the board, but just too narrow, I have a problem of sticking in the straps. That can make sense. You've got to find what works. That's a good idea. So Dan is saying in the chat, he did a couple things on the beach after this video. One was grabbing back on the beach where he wanted to go, just to get a feeling of where that was. And then taking off more downwind, which I really think can help, especially when you're learning the front loops, when you're trying to get planing forwards. Taking off downwind is just really helpful. So that all sounds great. George asked, what about the front leg? Shouldn't be fully extended for the forward loop? No, I don't think you need to think so much about your legs, actually, when you're learning the forwards. If you're really working on your stalled forwards, then the legs matter more, and then you're kind of steering the board downwind, and then what you're doing with your legs really matter. But often when I'm doing, like planing forwards or just normal forwards, I'm not thinking very much about my legs, and if I am thinking about them, I'm thinking about tucking them up, and that just creates like a smaller ball that will rotate faster. So you can think about tucking both of them up. I don't think you want to think about the front one being extended. So like tucked up, like we see in the video, like Dan is doing, I think is good. If you're doing those like stalled forwards, yeah, then you've got your front leg maybe extended. And so if that's what you're talking about, George, then we'll get into that discussion next weekend, which we've got that as one of our topics as posted by Marine. We'll talk about that next week. Dan also asked, should you sheet out a bit to lift the nose and encourage the board to jump before the loop? So that's a difficult one for me to answer, because I think as you get more advanced, then it really depends on what you're trying, what kind of loop you're trying to do. And for double loops, for planing forwards, for a lot of forwards, the answer is yes. You do this kind of little sheet out and this like extension before bringing everything in again. And so you might find that useful. I think when you're just learning the forwards, I think that that's too much to think about. But you know, you've passed the biggest barrier with the forward, so this might not be too much. Like, I don't want to overload your brain, right? Like when we're learning, it's a lot more effective to focus on one thing and get that thing right, rather than focus on 3 things and not get any of them right. But for example, like if you really want to like wind up to get a nice lofty lifted forward loop spin loop, you do what I like to refer to as like an X, where you're like really making an X with your body. You're extending, and this is as you're going off the ramp, you're extending everything. So you're extending your arms up into the sky, so you're kind of sheeting out, and you're extending your legs, and then bringing everything in really hard. You're bringing your legs up, you're bringing that backhand in really hard. It's like doing that pull-up with the backhand, this explosive moment, and pushing forward and downwind with that front hand. And that's like, for example, how you can do planing forwards on totally flat water, like with no chop at all, is with that technique. Is kind of like when you do this X, big explosive X, and then bring everything in really tight and get this nice small ball that rotates really fast. But again, you know, it's really up to you whether that's something that you want to think about right now. You do a little bit of a sheet-in, but you don't want to lose your speed as you're going into it as well. So, you know, speed is really helpful. Speed makes it a lot easier. It can be scary to think about going into it fast, but it makes it easier as well because you also have less power in your sail. Like the faster you're going relative to the wind, the faster you're going relative to the winds, the less pull there is in the sail, which also makes it easier. So I hope that answers your question, Dan, about whether you sheet out. Greg says, if you let the sail go forwards towards the nose of the board and grab the boom with your front hand near the harness lines, you'll be able to reach further back with your backhand. That's also a good point. You can reach pretty far back with your front hand, which then allows you to reach more back, which also is a pretty controlled, position on the sail. All right. Let's move on. Last question, and then I'm going to call it a night. Adrian asked about GoPros, cameras for filming. I've been filming with the Insta360. I've already talked to you guys about it quite a bit. I'm more or less happy with it. I think it creates a beautiful image. I'm using the X2. The remote doesn't work, which is kind of annoying, which means that the K4 harness mount is trickier to use than it probably should be, because I have to just record the whole session rather than recording moments of it. But I've been pretty happy with the X2. I would look into, if you're getting the camera for learning, I like the head mount. I like the mass mount. So you can check out Fly Mount. They make, I think a lot of people in the group, I don't have one, but I'll reach out to them and try and get one, are using Fly Mounts for the mass mount. And those two positions are pretty good because you can see what's happening and it doesn't hinder you too much. So like the K4 harness mount is great because you can see a lot, but I found it really difficult to sail with, so it's going to affect your sailing as you're sailing with it, which then I don't know how useful that is for really learning. So the helmet or the mass mount I think are good for figuring it out. One nice thing with having a camera that works with the remote, and maybe I'm just unlucky, maybe the other Insta360s work with the remote, is that it's just easier to go through the footage. And making that an easier process for you makes it that you'll use the camera more. It's more likely that you use the camera, and so then you're going through your footage more, and that is more effective for learning. But you know, there's a lot of people in the group who are using the cameras and just recording full session. Yeah, all right, so Carl's saying that also the GoPro remotes don't work. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with the remotes, but they don't really work. But anyway, that's just an issue of dealing with these action cameras. In general, I'm pretty happy with them. I've got a lot of footage to go through from Maui. Now, one of the things that now that I'm in Europe is going through all this footage that I was getting on Maui over the last few weeks and making some YouTube content for you guys. I've got a long list. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it. Anyway, I think that completes all the topics from our session. If I forgot something, let me know in the Facebook group and we'll get to it next week. As always, have a great windy week, and I'll see you in the Facebook group where I'm looking forward to another week of great discussion. I love all the engagement that's going on in here. Yeah, so I'll see you guys in the Facebook group. We've got a few more questions before I sign up. Pier Francesco. Yeah, have a great week, man. I hope you'll be able to windsurf soon. I hope to see you windsurfing in the group. Jesse, yeah, no worries. Send some pics from your setup. You also had the question about getting planing, and that I'd like to see photos of your gear to get into. All right, everyone. Thanks for showing up. I'll see you in the Facebook group. Have a windy week, and take care.